He created a legend that would haunt his army. Word spread through his vast camps like plague. 300 Spartans were worth 10,000 immortals. Fear replaced confidence. Men whispered that Greeks were blessed by gods, that Spartans couldn't be killed by mortal weapons, but fate had prepared its final cruelty. As Greeks celebrated surviving another impossible day, Persian forces, guided by the traitor Ephialtes, began climbing the mountain path in darkness. The 1,000 Phocian guards, caught completely off guard and terrified by the sudden appearance of enemies from an impossible direction, fled to higher ground rather than fight. The path to the Greek rear lay open. A runner reached Leonidas before dawn of day 3 with news that shattered any hope of survival. The Persians had discovered and taken the mountain path. By sunrise, Greek forces would be surrounded, attacked from front and rear simultaneously. Escape was still possible. Darkness could hide a retreat southward, saving the entire force. Here's where the story reaches its darkest and most glorious moment. Leonidas called his allies together in the pre-dawn darkness. The tactical situation was utterly hopeless now. He formally released the allied forces. There was no military reason for everyone to die in what would now be pure slaughter. Most contingents left immediately, grateful for life, marching south under cover of darkness. But when Leonidas turned to his 300 Spartans, fully expecting them to prepare for withdrawal, they began checking their weapons and armor instead. They knew. They'd always known from the moment of selection. This was exactly why he'd chosen men with living sons, not to preserve Spartan bloodlines, but because men with heirs could die without ending their family names. 700 Thespians stepped forward. Their commander spoke simply, "We stay." These men had no Spartan blood, no lifetime of death preparation, no cultural obsession with glorious endings. Just free men choosing to die beside the 300 because some things matter more than survival. History often forgets these volunteers who chose death when life was freely offered. The Spartans' response gives modern readers chills across 25 centuries. They began funeral rites for themselves, oiling bodies, singing death hymns, preparing spirits for the journey to Hades. One warrior joked about finally getting a peaceful night's sleep. Another quipped that his wife complained he never spent time at home anyway. Laughter in the face of certain death, this was courage in its purest form. Dawn of day 3 revealed the trap's brutal completion. Persian forces massed at both ends of the narrow pass. Tens of thousands visible at each approach, more beyond counting. The mathematics of courage reached its ultimate test, perhaps 1,000 Greeks against the full weight of the largest army ever assembled. Leonidas addressed his men one final time. Historical sources differ on his exact words, but all agree on the essential meaning. Today they would teach the entire world how free men die. What happened in those final hours haunts historians studying the scarce archaeological remains. Greeks abandoned their defensive positioning entirely, advancing into the open to kill as many enemies as possible before falling. This wasn't defense anymore. It was a statement of defiance, written in Persian blood, a final message to tyranny itself. The arrow storm came as predicted, as promised, as feared. Thousands of shafts darkening the morning sun until noon seemed like dusk. Good. Leonidas laughed, raising a shield. "We'll fight in the shade." Shields locked overhead like roof tiles, creating a bronze ceiling. Greeks advanced steadily under the deadly rain, an unstoppable formation of will and bronze. Close combat reached unprecedented levels of savage fury. Spears shattered on armor and bone within minutes. Men fought with broken weapons, with fists, with teeth, with anything that could kill. Leonidas led from the front as kings should, killing Persians until multiple arrows found him simultaneously. His men fought with berserk fury to retrieve their fallen king's body, a swirling melee of unprecedented violence. 4 separate times, Persians seized Leonidas's corpse. 4 times, Greeks took it back, fighting like demons possessed. The brutal final moments unfolded as the sun climbed toward noon. Greek numbers dwindled steadily. Weapons broke beyond use. Wounded men fought until blood loss claimed them. The final few dozen retreated to a small hill, Leonidas's body in their protective center, shields facing outward as Persian masses closed like a noose. But even in those last moments, courage maintained its own arithmetic. Persians died in droves, approaching the final defenders. Warriors who'd conquered 3 continents hesitated before men who welcomed death as a lover. The end came with arrows, not swords. Xerxes wouldn't risk more close combat casualties against men who'd already cost him thousands. Tens of thousands of shafts turned the last defenders into human pincushions. The 300 Spartans were gone. The 700 Thespians lay beside them in final brotherhood. The pass belonged to Persia. As the last Greek fell and silence claimed the killing floor, Xerxes stood among mountains of his own dead, staring at 300 Spartan corpses who'd cost him so dearly. Something cold touched his heart then. If 300 could do this, what would united Greece accomplish? The immediate aftermath revealed victory's true cost. Xerxes ordered Leonidas's body found among the tangled dead. What he commanded next violated every sacred rule of ancient warfare and honor. He had the Spartan king's corpse beheaded and crucified, displaying it as warning and trophy. Even his own Persian advisors were shocked. Greeks and Persians alike honored enemy dead. This mutilation was unspoken admission of how deeply 300 men had wounded the god king's pride and confidence. The death toll painted a grotesque picture of courage's price. Spartan and Thespian casualties, 100%. Every single man who chose to stay died exactly where he stood. No retreat, no surrender, no prisoners, no survivors. They achieved precisely what they intended, a death so glorious it would echo through eternity. Persian losses remain debated, but even conservative ancient sources claim 20,000 dead. Modern historians argue over specifics, but all agree on massive casualties. The god king had traded dozens of his soldiers for every single Greek defender. The arithmetic of courage had somehow balanced impossibly unequal scales. What happened next defied every expectation about warfare's aftermath. Instead of being demoralized by the defenders' annihilation, Greece erupted in unified rage. The 300's sacrifice didn't break Greek. It forged separate city-states into something harder than bronze, stronger than stone. News spread like wildfire through every Greek city and island. 300 men had held the world's mightiest army for 3 days. They'd chosen death over submission to tyranny. If 300 could accomplish that through will alone, what couldn't united Greece achieve against this seemingly invincible foe? City-states that had squabbled for centuries over trivial boundaries suddenly found common cause in honoring the sacrifice. But here's what most people miss about Thermopylae's true purpose. Those 3 days were never really about holding a mountain pass. They were about buying time. Precious days when Athens could evacuate, when Greek fleets could gather, when scattered armies could mobilize for coordinated resistance. The 300 had consciously traded their lives for Greek preparation time. The strategic importance revealed itself immediately in the following weeks. Xerxes marched south unopposed, found Athens completely empty, burned it in impotent rage. But the Greek fleet, prepared by those crucial days, waited at Salamis. The Greek army, assembled during that purchased time, gathered at Plataea. The 300's deliberate sacrifice had transformed everything about the strategic situation. Xerxes' soldiers had witnessed 300 men choose death rather than submit to the god king's will. They'd seen Persia's absolute best warriors, the supposedly invincible immortals, fall to citizen soldiers. Doubt crept through Persian ranks like poison, corroding confidence from within. Then came the moment that echoed through following centuries. Greek messengers spread word of the last stand to every corner of the Hellenic world. The message was devastatingly simple. If Sparta's own king could die for Greece, no sacrifice was too great for any Greek to make. Unity exploded from shared sacrifice, from collective determination to honor the 300's choice. The monument Greeks erected at Thermopylae after victory bore simple words that still bring chills. Stranger, tell the Spartans that here we lie, obedient to their laws. No boasting of kills achieved. No mention of impossible odds overcome, just duty fulfilled unto death itself. But the 300's war wasn't finished, it was only beginning. Their ghosts would march with every Greek army that followed. Their sacrifice would burn in every Greek heart. Their example would transform farmers and merchants into heroes. Xerxes had killed 300 men and inadvertently created an immortal legend more powerful than any living army. Revenge came swift and brutal. At Salamis, Greek ships smashed the Persian fleet in narrow waters where numbers meant nothing, exactly the lesson of Thermopylae applied to naval warfare. At Plataea, Greek spears broke Persian dreams of European conquest forever. The citizen soldier Xerxes had mocked drove his massive army from Greek soil in disgrace. Democracy survived. Philosophy flourished. Western civilization endured to shape our modern world. But here's the most shocking part of Thermopylae's legacy. We don't celebrate Xerxes' tactical victory in taking the pass. We remember and honor the losers who died there. The 300 who fell became infinitely more famous than the millions who killed them. Why? Because they represented something universal that transcends cultures and centuries, the free individual standing firm against tyranny's overwhelming force. 2,500 years later, their stand still inspires humanity. When anyone, anywhere faces impossible odds for principle rather than surrendering to power, we invoke their example. When the weak resist the strong, when courage trumps calculation, when someone says no to overwhelming force, they channel the 300's spirit. Thermopylae wasn't merely a battle. It became a template for human courage itself, a proof that some things matter more than survival. The mathematics were brutally simple. 300 Spartans delayed millions for 3 crucial days. Those days saved Greek civilization from Persian conquest. Greek civilization birthed democracy, philosophy, science, arts, essentially everything we consider Western civilization. The modern world exists in its current form because 300 men chose death over submission. Ask yourself honestly, would you have stayed when escape was possible? When death was absolutely certain? When cold mathematics said resistance was utterly futile? The Spartans' answer echoes across 25 centuries. Some things are worth dying for: freedom, honor, the future of your entire civilization. What Xerxes never realized would cost him everything in history's final judgment. He won a narrow mountain pass but lost immortality itself. Nobody names their son Xerxes today, but Leonidas? That name still graces birth certificates across the world. The God King is largely forgotten, except as the 300's antagonist. The defenders are eternal. The dead would have the final word in humanity's longest conversation about courage and sacrifice. Their message rings clear across 25 centuries. Freedom isn't free. Sometimes it costs everything you have and everything you are. And sometimes that ultimate price is worth paying for what comes after. This is why we remember them, not for winning, but for standing firm. Not for surviving, but for choosing meaningful death over meaningless surrender. They traded 3 days of life for 25 centuries of inspiration. 300 men chose death and gave humanity 2,500 years of freedom's example. They held the line between slavery and liberty with their bodies and blood. And though their flesh fell to Persian arrows, that line they defended never broke, never bent, never yielded. In the narrow pass where East met West, West said no with bronze and blood. And that refusal, spoken in sacrifice and sealed with death, echoes still through every struggle against tyranny. The 300 of Thermopylae didn't just die gloriously, they became eternal. And in becoming eternal, they proved that while tyrants can kill men's bodies, they cannot kill what men stand for. The last stand that ended in death began something that will never die, the knowledge that ordinary people can face impossible odds and through courage and sacrifice achieve immortality. If you want to explore more moments where impossible courage changed history forever, where ordinary people achieved extraordinary immortality, subscribe to Flow of History. We bring you the battles, the sacrifices, the blood-soaked moments where everything pivoted. Hit that subscribe button now, because the next story of legendary courage is coming soon.